Welcome to the Radiant Astrology Podcast, where we illuminate the wisdom of the cosmos for spiritual insight and soul-level healing. I'm your host, Christina Caudill. Thank you for joining me. Hello and welcome to the Radiant Astrology Podcast. I'm your host, Christina Caudill, and in this episode, our guest is astrologer Laura Nalbandian. And many of you who know Laura's work know that one of her biggest projects is the NORWAC conference, which starts this week, May 24th. So I was really honored that she was able to find some time to come on the podcast to talk to me about astrology and to share the details on NORWAC. So we'll get to that later in the podcast. Our topic today is what the planets want from us. So what do the planets want from us? If we look at our natal chart as an indication of how we can grow using astrology and the symbols of the planets as tools for growth, then that really gives us a much more empowering perspective when we work with the insights that astrology can provide. And I really love this approach. And Laura has been doing evolutionary astrology since I think the 80s. So she is the perfect person to talk to us and to delve deeper into this topic. Now, as I record this episode, it is the first day of Gemini season. Yay! The Sun and Mercury are cazimi, so they are tightly conjunct in Gemini, right at the first degree of Gemini. And so, Gemini is the realm of the mind, and Mercury rules Gemini, right? So Mercury is strong. He's in his rulership, and he is the messenger of the gods. And so this is a great time to be sharing ideas, opening to information and knowledge and learning and teaching. We can expect for ideas and information to be flowing more freely. You probably just heard my dog. She agrees that Gemini season should be an exciting few weeks ahead. So I also wanted to announce that I'm still doing my Soul Emergence Astrology audio readings. It is a limited time reading, and you need to book that by June 1st. I've gotten quite a few readings, so there is a little bit of a wait time, probably about a week or so. Check the website, radiantastrology.com, for all the details. The Soul Emergence Astrology reading is looking at the Saturn-Pluto South Node conjunction, what it means in your life, and how you can engage more consciously with it. Saturn and Pluto are very karmic planets, and there is some kind of calling happening in the Capricorn house of our chart. And not only just there, but we're all in some ways impacted by this need to really rise to the occasion in who we're meant to be, how we're meant to help engage the world, because obviously, right now, there is a lot of deep change, foundational level change happening in the world. And we are responsible for helping create this new world to help actually take down and eliminate that which is no longer working in our society. And that's a lot of the job of Pluto, but we are agents of these planets in the world. And Saturn is asking us to find the courage, to find the leadership, to find the focus and discipline to actually apply ourselves in our path of karma. So if you're interested in that, as I said, check it out. You have until June 1st. And I have finally decided to launch my Patreon for the podcast. I know I've been saying forever, I'm going to do it soon, but I think a good time will be right after the Gemini new moon. Patreon is great because it helps creators, such as those like me who do podcasts, to receive funding from their audience. And so you can support the podcast just because you love it and you want me to continue doing it. And I actually do need support to continue doing it because it takes a lot of time and effort. So I would really appreciate your support. So keep an eye out for that. However, I'm also trying to decide what kind of member benefits to have and to offer at the different levels. So if you have some ideas, talk to me, share them with me, comment on my Facebook page or on my Instagram at Radiant Astro, and let me know, what would you like to see me offer for subscribers? Because usually at like different levels, then you can get benefits. Now, doing one-on-one readings and everything takes up a lot of my time. So I'm really interested in forming more of community type of engagement. I'm thinking maybe a private Facebook group. Right now, I have a private Facebook group, but I've turned off posting. I'm thinking for a members podcast group, I could have a private Facebook group and you can post and ask questions, and maybe once in a while I can go in there and do a Facebook Live or something. Maybe do a monthly webinar for members at a certain level. I don't know, maybe do a drawing or a raffle for a reading. I've seen some podcasters do that. So there's plenty of options. So if you were to get a subscription to the podcast, let me know what kind of benefit you would like to see me offer, and I will take those into consideration. Again, you can reach me on Facebook at Radiant Astrology or on Instagram at Radiant Astro. So now on to my illustrious guest. Laura Nalbandian is a second generation astrologer. She is the owner and coordinator of NORWAC, the Northwestern Astrological Conference that is in Seattle every year. As I said, this year it begins May 23rd. And NORWAC was established in 1984 by Laura's mother, Maggie, a very beloved astrologer. Laura has a love of teaching and lectures at conferences around the world. Her focus is the Pluto method of evolutionary astrology, and she will be launching the Soul Wise Evolutionary Astrology course coming in September. And stay tuned because she'll have all the details on that at the end of the podcast. Laura still works with clients. She consults and guides her clients through gaining clarity and insight on their soul, life purpose, and life challenges. And as I said, Laura is the director of NORWAC, and they are sold out this year. They cap it at 500 people. And Laura said that she likes to keep it small and intimate so that, you can really connect with people. I mean, you look around and see some legendary astrologers. All of your favorite astrologers are usually there, and they come from all over the world. I'm not going to be there this year, but I'm hoping to make it in 2020. But in any case, NORWAC is my favorite conference. I highly suggest you go. Now, even though she said it sold out, Laura said you can contact her at lauranalbandian.com. I believe her contact form is there, and she can tell you if she has some tickets available, because she did have a few tickets available as of a few days ago. She had some cancellations. So if you're in Seattle or you can get to Seattle and you want to go to NORWAC, then contact Laura. So with that, I wanted to open the discussion with Laura around how to work with clients so that they can really attune to what it is that is being asked of them from the planets. When we look at these transits or planets in our chart, a lot of times, we can almost feel like we are being thrown around by the gods, right? Like at times they can overwhelm us. However, if we want to really understand how to work with the planets, because it's kind of just like if you're working with someone, say you have a boss who speaks Mandarin and you don't speak Mandarin, and the boss is always like yelling at you or getting upset or frustrated with you, but at the end of the day, you don't know what he wants. So you just think he's bullying you. But if you were both to speak the same language, and you understood what it is he wants, and then you can fulfill on these goals. So that's kind of one way I think of looking at it. There's plenty of metaphors that we use. Laura's filled with metaphors. She's great at them. But it's essentially that there is such a thing as fate at times, but astrology isn't all fate. A lot of it is simply being able to read the signs and know what is being asked of you, right? So that you don't have to be subject to the harsh sides of the planets. Sometimes when we sense that we are subject to something harsh of a planet, it's not that we manifested it, it's trying to get our attention. And oftentimes it's our internal world, it's our psyche that is trying to get our attention. So hopefully I have gotten your attention, and we can welcome Laura Nalbandian to the Radiant Astrology Podcast. So I hope you enjoy my talk with Laura. Hi, Laura. Thank you for joining me on the Radiant Astrology Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Christine. I really appreciate it. And thank you for doing these podcasts. They're great.
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, it gives me an opportunity to speak to such interesting people like yourself. And I really appreciate you taking the time because I know that you've got your big NORWAC coming up, which we can talk about that in a bit. First, I wanted to ask you because I sat in on your ISAR talk a couple of weeks ago that was called What Do the Outer Planets Want from Us? And I just love that because I think a lot of people think that the planets are just zapping us with energy or, their natal chart is just a fixture of their character and it can be very limiting.
Right.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about this perspective.
Well, basically, coming from a perspective of understanding that the planets and everything in astrology correlate to human experience. They're not causing human experience. So the astrology that I practice is not causal, meaning the planets aren't sending down rays to make us do things. Now, everything in the universe vibrates, so there is probably energetic resonance in some way, but it is not causing our personality, nor is it causing our behavior or causing the events that are happening in our lives. So looking at astrology from a correlative point of view, meaning correlating the planetary cycles with human cycles, the planetary energies and the way we see the planets, and correlate those to personality traits or human traits or traits that we express. So the parts of our consciousness, the parts of our psyche are represented by the planets. So I'm very clear in my language when I'm teaching, and I'm very clear in my language when I'm doing interviews such as this or podcasts or webinars, in that making sure that the language delineates and communicates that the cycle is, that it is a cycle, that's something that is representative of something that already exists and it's showing us. So astrology really is a tool to help us understand and mark those cycles and mark that phenomena so that we can hopefully have some heads up to what's coming our way. And then asking ourselves the question, and particularly as an astrologer, ask myself this question, not only for myself, but for my clients: what do the planets want of us? And so in the webinar that I did, I talked very distinctly about what we might get, what we often get from a planet, particularly what we might often fear we are going to get from a planet, and then look at what the planet itself ultimately wants. So as an example, to say that when Saturn is transiting, people are often afraid, whether they're new to astrology or consumers of astrology, and that these outer planets tend to frighten people because it's bringing, or not bringing, but it is signaling the changes in our lives, right?
Oh, signaling. I like that word. I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, they're signaling the changes in our lives, and humans aren't really overly fond of the unknown. And that's why people like astrology. They're trying to get a handle on what seems to be the unknown. And astrology can be a phenomenal tool for that. So when we look at Saturn, what we fear we might get is that we're going to be restricted, or that we're going to get stuck, or that we're going to feel frustrated. And yes, those things can, in fact, express themselves during the cycle. But does that really what Saturn wants? Does really Saturn want to restrict us, to show us judgments in our lives, or for us to be afraid and frustrated, or to feel contained or less than in our lives? And I am here to say that I do not believe that energetically Saturn wants those things of us. That cycle will signal those things, or we will experience those things if we're not paying attention to what Saturn really wants. So Saturn really wants us to slow down, to set some limits in our lives, to be patient. And if we're prone to rushing ahead, let's say you have Mars in Aries. I think I used this example in the webinar. Or your moon in Aries, or your sun in Aries. And right now, Saturn is making a 90-degree angle back to your planet in Aries. If it's around the 15 to 23 mark right now, because Saturn's going to retrograde back. So it's making an angle to that, a hard, stressful angle called a square. And it's challenging us, if we have planets in Aries or Libra or Cancer, they're challenging us to slow down, and particularly Aries, which wants to rush ahead, it's headstrong, It's instinctive, it's reactive, it's aggressive, it sort of shoots now and aims later. It's ready, aim, shoot. It's ready, shoot, aim, or
Instinctive.
whatever that phrase is. You know what I'm saying? It's that it just sort of leaps into things. And Saturn making this square back to an Aries planet is calling for patience, calling for us to take accountability and be responsible for slowing down and setting our own limits. Because if we don't, it's not that Saturn's going to apply the limits, because Saturn's just a planet moving around in our solar system. What Saturn represents and correlates to is a cycle and a period in our lives where we will, in fact, experience a slowdown in some way. Either we're going to slow ourselves down, be a little bit more disciplined, apply a little bit more control, be accountable for what we're doing, or this will be a time period where those things will be in some way enforced on us or forced on us. So we experience that as an action outside of us, limiting us, versus taking ownership of the planet's cycle at that time and what it's signaling for us in our lives. And when we take ownership of it, which is truly a Saturn function, and be accountable to account for our own actions and know how to respond, to be mature in the process, then we don't have to then attract things in our lives that will enforce the energy to get us to take a look at our lives in the way that this cycle is calling to us to take a look at.
I really resonate with that because I have Saturn in the 7th house. And I found that, if I don't do my Saturn, if I don't set my own limits, then it'll come from the outside by some Saturnian figure. And I actually tend to, I think when I was younger, I tended to, seek those authority figures. And I would be, great at doing what I was told, but I wouldn't know what to do if I wasn't told. And that was the maturity process of owning my Saturn, so that's my life story, basically.
You said it quite clearly. If you don't own that energy, what Saturn represents will get expressed and externalized and projected out into the world. And we will then attract, and particularly for you, the 7th house, any planets in the 7th house, which is a naturally Libra quality, which is about other people out in the world. It appears to be other people out in the world. And when planets are in our 7th house, in our natal chart, or even transiting or moving through our natal house, 7th house, then it is typical and common to attract that energy in our lives. And if we're not owning it, then again, it's projected off to other people, and we feel as if they're doing something to us, whether it's a functional thing that we might see that we want, or something that we don't want. And here's the thing. Wish I could remember the name of the book. I have it in a reading list I have, but I remember this. It was a psychology book about relationships. And how did it go?
Was it astrology and psychology, or just psychology?
I think it was both, because you're right. I think it was both, because it said, if you experience or think you have a lack of something, let's say it's water in your chart, in a sense, you feel like you are missing emotion in your life. So it will be natural and easy to attract an emotional individual into your world, or emotional people who play out those emotions. But over time, their emotions become drama, and it sucks the life force out of you. It would be like if you didn't have any earth, or you had real attraction, no grounding in your life. And so you attracted people who had a lot of earth qualities. And so that felt really good at first, somebody to stabilize you, somebody to ground you, where you could feel like you could settle. And then after a while, it just feels staid, stuck, boring. So what happens is, at first you're attracting what you think you're missing. And if you don't integrate that quality, then it turns to its shadow component. I think even in this way, looking at transits, that is the case. And certainly planets in the 7th would be similar to that as well, if not directly.
What that makes me think a lot of is, the whole psychological idea of projection, where, anyone that we put up on a pedestal, especially those that we put up on a pedestal as gurus or what have you. Right. Actually, the Jungian view is there's an inner image that we're projecting onto them that actually belongs to us. So that's why a lot of times the whole guru relationship is we put people on a pedestal, and then as soon as they show their humanity, we tear them down. And really, and it doesn't always have to be that dramatic, but really what it is, we start to recognize that we are just as special. We have that inner image belongs to us. And it's about that integrating. And so the guru actually does serve a purpose to be an image, to help us to visualize and experience that, just like you were saying, like an element that we don't have, a missing element.
Right.
But then it's the integration is needed.
I think that I'm trying to find that book as you're talking.
Is it Stephen Arroyo, or I'm looking at?
No, although you'd think it would be. I have an extensive reading list, and I'm opening up the document as we speak. And as we discovered earlier, my computer's being a little on the
and just to let our listeners know that you have this awesome reading list on lauranalbandian.com/reading-list. I'll have the link in the show notes of some excellent books on astrology and psychology astrology. Which one is it you're thinking of?
I think it's called The Secrets of Love and Partnership.
Oh, I've never heard of that one.
I know, right? It was out years and years ago. I bet that book's not even in print, but you can always go to abe.com. A is an apple, B is in boy, E is in Edward, abe.com, and you can find used books anywhere in the world, and they will ship them to you cheap. You can find used books at a great price. My brother would hate me for saying that.
Oh, yeah, because your brother has a astrology book business, right? Which is it?
That's
Astrology et al.?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, astrology et al. Absolutely.
You can also get astrology books at astrology et al. Just so we don't get in trouble.
Well, let's plug him and make him happy. There we go. But when you've got a book out of print and you can't find it, and I think that Amazon does certainly fill some of that role, but I think ABE does it better, and might as well support.
I got a great book from ABE that was out of print. It's it was the ones by Jeffrey Wolf Green and Stephen Forrest, Measuring the Night.
Yep, Measuring the Night.
Volume 1 and 2, and they were like $200 or whatever on Amazon and everywhere else. But you know what? I think I got the last ones from ABE for like $50 each. The rest of them.
Yeah, the introduction to volume 2 is me back with my married name.
Oh my god!
It's it would be under Laura.
I just got that one second.
Yeah, that's the introduction is mine in the volume 2, the red one, I think.
Yeah, that's an awesome one.
Back in 90. That would have been like 98, somewhere in the late 90s that book came out.
Honestly, I get so much out of those books still. I think
they're really good.
Hopefully people will demand they reprint them or something. But I got my copy. But I also, this whole idea of the planets, what they want from us, I think it's so exciting really to look like these planets. It was actually when I was at UAC, which is another one of your projects, the major international conference that was in Chicago last year. And I was listening to an archetypal astrologer, Saffron.
Oh, yes. Saffron Rossi.
Yes, Saffron Rossi. And this was her talk as well. She was basically talking about the archetypes and each of the planets as an archetype that has its own, pretty much its own consciousness, kind of like how the Jungian view that our soul has its own consciousness and wants something from us. And if we look at each planet as having that same life, being alive, and we can work with it. And I know Saffron said something like someone had I want to say Saturn in Leo in the 10th or something. And when the client came to visit, she said something like, I'm thinking of King Arthur. This is who you're meant to embody. And the woman was floored because she had just that morning been watching a movie on King Arthur, Well,
when you're really tapped in at an intuitive archetypal level, as an astrologer, and you do it long enough, or you're just naturally intuitive, those kinds of things are common. That's the analogies you pick up because you're picking up on energy around you. The analogies you use, the stories you use in a session or in a class consistently resonate with people. It says, and I've used analogies in a reading that I had never used before because it just sprung to my brain, and that person gets it in that hyper specific way, just right there. And I think that when you're dealing with planets at that level and not, let me say this before I finish that thought. That is, there's a difference between exterior astrology and interior astrology. The astrology of the outer world and the astrology of the inner world. Neither one is right or wrong or good or bad. They're just different in their approach. Jungian astrology, psychotherapy, blended with astrology, and spiritual types of astrology, like evolutionary astrology, are interior methods, meaning that we're looking at dominantly the interior of a human being, where traditional astrology and predictive astrology, not all traditional, I'm sure, but I don't want to make sweeping statements about it, but they tend to be externally based, looking at the events of the world, looking at your life from that external point of view. And I see that the outer world, my belief is that the outer world is a manifestation of the inner world. So why not start where it starts? Why not go to the heart of the matter? And so spiritual astrology, evolutionary astrology, and psychology of any kind, therapeutic models are all dealing with the person from the inside of their world. So that's where, when you're looking at what do the planets want, that makes more sense. They're not acting on us in that way. And so the point is that when you're operating archetypally, it's a very different type of astrology. And again, I'm not here to say that one is right and one is wrong, or one is better and one is worse. I think they both serve their purpose. If you are asking questions that are strictly mundane about the outer world, then you need those skills and tools as an astrologer to be able to address those.
I think that's
Right?
an important thing to delineate as well, even as astrologers, because, I get people that come to me because they know I work with the inner world, and someone who's looking for something else, just the events of their life, is going to be disappointed, and
Yep.
that's fine. But I personally, I came from astrology as a client for many years, until I realized, and it was of a more predictive astrologer, until I just realized, gosh, life is more than just a series of events to me.
It is.
You know?
Absolutely. I have a funny story to tell about the early days of being an astrologer. Now, I started studying astrology when I was 24 years old. The very first time I was 16, and really I wasn't interested. So I started studying astrology more seriously at 24. So that was 1983. And I started, Jeffrey Wolf Green, who wrote Pluto, the Evolutionary Journey of the Soul, was my teacher. And he lived in Seattle, and he was the astrologer in our bookstore, Astrology at All.
Wow. In your bookstore. So he had like a little desk, you would come in and see people?
Well, he had his office, and Mom had her office in the bookstore in the back, and we had classrooms. And Jeff came into our bookstore. I met Jeff when I was 17, in 1976, and so he is like a brother to me, because I've known him.
We're like a family practically, but I just never pictured him in in an office in a bookstore. I just love it though.
No, he had it wasn't it wasn't like an office. We had our bookstore in the front. In the back, we had two classrooms, and then we had a row of small little offices. We had a tarot reader and a psychic, and then Mom and Jeff shared an office to do astrology readings. And so I didn't start doing astrology readings in the bookstore. I mean, I did psychic fairs and stuff, but I didn't start doing astrology readings in the bookstore until after Jeff left. That would have been about like 89 or something. So in the early parts, I remember a woman came into my office, and I assumed she knew what kind of astrology we did in our bookstore. We were all evolutionary astrologers. Jeffrey, Mom, me, that was where we all came from. And so I started doing my spiel. About 20 minutes in, I said, "Do you have any questions?" And she said, "Yeah, well, this past life stuff, that's all well and good, but really I just came here to find out if my golf game was going to improve." And I was like, I just kind of looked at her. I was like, in my own brain, I'm going like, what? So I said to her that that is not the type of astrology I do. Said, I'm going to give all of your money back because you need to find an astrologer who can help you. And as she left, I couldn't help myself. I said, I have one piece of advice for you. She said, yes, what? And I said, practice. Because she wanted to know if her golf game was going to improve. And if you practice, it probably will. But it just reminded me, and it was actually a particularly
and that's
powerful.
actually really disempowering too, because it's like, is it going to improve? I mean,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Is that happening to me? It doesn't happen to you. That's something that you actually have to,
Right.
take some ownership around.
Right. And I've had other experiences like that. A woman called to ask me if I could predict when her daughter was going to get married. And normally I just say no, and I'm not that type of astrologer, and give them some references. But I don't know, something came over me that day, and I said, don't you think the better question would be, will my daughter be happy? Because I said, the likelihood is that if she really had the intention if her goal was just to get married, probably could happen. But don't you think the better question would be, will my daughter be happy? If that's what, if you're going to ask a question about your daughter. And she didn't say anything. She just hung up. But
that was your answer.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, even though everything's very clear on my website about the type of astrology I do, I don't know, maybe sometimes people don't read, but what I try to do in the beginning of every reading, which I think every astrologer should do, is sort of set your intention for the reading every time. Hey, just in case you didn't know, I'm an evolutionary astrologer, and that means this.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be sort of like a person who really wanted to understand their life path from a spiritual, self-empowered point of view, going to a strictly predictive astrologer. Those might not be a match, right? So I think it's important for an astrologer to even, and I do, every new client, I let them know right up front, this is who I am, this is what I'm going to do. I even have a disclaimer that they sign that basically says the same thing. I will not be predicting anything for your life. I will not tell you what to do.
Now, do you think, I've noticed something, obviously it does feel like we're in kind of some kind of a resurgence of astrology and being taken seriously. One of the good things though is while there's still, while some people are still waking up to just that astrology has any validity at all, there's also a lot of people becoming, and I feel like it's ever since Saturn ingress Capricorn, I don't know, but a lot of our clients are becoming savvier. They're becoming smarter. They're reading more. So it's an interesting position to be in, because if you put out anything publicly, you don't want to talk over it used to be the problem is, like for me, I wouldn't want to talk over people too much. But now I almost feel like if I lowball it too much, they're insulted. They want more. And I think that's actually a good thing. Are you seeing that as well?
Yeah, no, it's a good thing. And again, I've learned over time to be able to remember to ask my clients, or to let them know I'm not going to use a lot of astrology lingo in this. If you have questions about where I'm getting this, I'm happy to point it out to you, and I'll turn the chart around and do a little tutorial for them. Some people might have questions. And again, coming back to what do the planets want? When clients come in and they have a little bit of information that they've read, just enough to scare themselves, with a Pluto transit or a Neptune transit, Uranus, Saturn, any of the outer planets. And so they come in here asking me questions about, from that fearful place. And this is where I come back to talking about the intention of the cycle. Because asking the question, what does the planet really want, is really trying to get to the intention, or coming from a place of being open to the intention of the cycle, of what that cycle is signaling to us in our lives, right? And so everything evolves, including our consciousness. Some people evolve, everyone evolves at a different rate. And so getting clients to come out of that fearful place, and by talking to them about what is the intention of the cycle, really does help. Mm-hmm. That way they feel like they can do something. So when I talk about the intention of Saturn, which is, let's say somebody has Saturn transiting the second house. Now, the second house has to do with financial resources that we have. So our personal property, anything that we can pick up and move belongs to the second house. On the interior side of the second house, it is our sense of self worth. And you can see, if you think about it enough, that historically cultures tie their value, individuals tie their value to what a person has, so the resources they have. On another level, resources certainly are paramount to our sense of survival and our very survival. So if Saturn's transiting the second, I talk to clients in a very grounded sort of way about how they can apply discipline to their financial picture, which then leads to the intention of the cycle is for them to feel more responsible and accountable for their resources, which will then lead to a greater sense of worth and value and confidence in that process. Mm-hmm. So that is going from the talking about the external part of it, but leading to the interior, or coming from the interior and leading it to the outside manifestation of it. And so giving clients grounded things of, if a client says to me, yeah, I recently just got a financial advisor. Saturn just went into their second. That's all good. And I talk to them about, don't just leave it up to your financial advisor to be the one responsible for your resources. That this is your job as well, that you need to participate. You need to be wise and considered in the process. So there's all kinds of, ways of talking about the planets and the transits that are going on that can empower versus disempower. To empower in the sense that somebody feels like they can do something in their lives because the cycle is signaling, the planet is signaling for this energy to be in their lives. Okay, here it is in your life. What are you going to do with it? This is how I think that you can best serve yourself in this cycle, versus waiting and doing nothing and feeling victimized by the events as life comes at us, trying to force us to evolve and grow.
Yeah. And what it makes me think of is it's almost like if you were to have a prophetic dream and maybe it wasn't literally true, but something in you said, I have to change something about my life. And if you listen to that and you make changes, then you can participate more in life, not necessarily control your destiny, but be stepping up to your destiny.
You're absolutely right, Christina. This isn't about controlling things. That would be folly to believe that we can control our destiny completely. But we do have control over the way we show up in our lives. And so I think about it this way. If there is a train coming by and I know I got to get on that train and it's not going to stop for me, I know that if I'm in motion with that train, I have a better shot of getting on that train than coming from a dead stop trying to catch a train that's moving. So what I mean by that is that if I'm engaged in the energetic process of the cycle, then I'm creating and helping move the energy. I'm engaged with that, and it's sort of like a wave. I can catch that wave. I can catch that energy because I'm moving with it. I'm not waiting for the water to crash over me or the train to escape me or whatever metaphor you want to use. I mean, I've got 100 metaphors. It's sort of like, another way to say it is, if you're on the ocean and the wind is blowing, if you don't put up your sail and you're in a sailboat, then you don't get to use the wind. But if you're not paying attention energetically, then you get storms pushing you along, right? Mm-hmm. It's very different. It's sort of like, if you ignore what you're being called to do, our unconscious then manifests energy in our world, upping the ante, making it harder and harder and harder or more difficult until we're pushed along in some way. And it feels like forces outside of us are doing it. And so the other thing about interior astrology is that we are using language in a way that is removing the victimization from the language, so that something's not happening to you, and how to shift the narrative so that you're engaged and you're participating. And as you say, no, you're not necessarily in control, but you certainly feel like you have a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
You can co-create with the universe. There's
exactly.
Yeah. And, I've often I remember one time in a reading, my client was having a Neptune transit or something, and, was just feeling a little disoriented, lost, whatever. And I had said, you'll be going from the sense of driving the bus to adjusting the sails on a sailboat. Like that the wind can be an element that you can work with, but
Yeah,
the wind is there and you have to work with it. And it was funny because
exactly.
it was a one time of like one of the first times where someone had said that she always uses that phrase driving the bus. And I've never used drive the bus before. That just really just came to me. And she said that was
Well,
like one of the things she always says is driving the bus. And I just kind of came up with that because it was like she's gonna have to take a step away from being a bus driver and work with the sails of a sailboat. So
right. And as I was saying earlier, when you're in tune with your client, when you're in tune with the archetypes, you will naturally, unconsciously zone right in on the kind of metaphor, imagery that will absolutely speak to your client. And when we're thinking, like, for instance, Uranus, it seems as if what Uranus wants is chaos, but Uranus doesn't want chaos. That's not its intention. Chaos is a byproduct of avoiding what Uranus wants. Uranus
yeah.
wants authenticity and wants us to break free from our static and stuck forms, places where we've kind of gone to sleep and kind of just do it because that's the way everybody else does it, or that's the way we've done it. So Uranus really wants us to wake up. And so
Yeah.
energetically, we can attract experiences that sort of jolt us out of our sleepwalking slumber to wake up and to be more authentic and present in what it is we're doing.
Oh, that's so
So the
good.
more
That's
we
so good because
come,
Uranus can really strike fear into people, which is interesting because it's like, we all say we want freedom, we want to be
yeah,
free and liberated, but then when it's happening to us, then we can be like, whoa, wait a second, I'm not ready for this. That's why I think Uranus is one of the ones, I mean, I'm sure they all are, but you got to stay on top of it. You have to really go with it. Otherwise, it can really feel chaotic, like you were saying.
yeah, and that is about catching that Uranian wave and being in the presence of it and being part of the process versus being tossed about by the storm of it. Uranus, as I said, wants individuation, authenticity. It wants us to be free of our own patterns of the past. So oftentimes people think, if they have Uranus transiting the 6th or the 10th, that it's about leaving that job or changing a career. And it's not about that. It's about changing the dynamics
Hmm.
around the job or the career. So it's how you've been doing what you've been doing, not necessarily what you've been doing. I recommend to people who have Uranus transiting the 4th or transiting the moon in some way, whether it's a conjunction, trine, opposition, square, sextile, any of those aspects. It's my theory that, again, if you start building the energy yourself in a way that resonates with the planet, then you're already in motion with it, right?
Hmm.
So mixing things up so that it's like moving the forks where the spoons go, and moving the cups where the plates were, moving your toothbrush to a different place. All the things that you naturally reach for out of habit, which is a fourth house and moon function, sets you off kilter a bit and requires you to be more in the moment. So by doing that intentionally, then I'm creating that energetic quality in my life so that I'm prepping myself for the Uranian energy to come, so that I'm not waiting for it just to happen to me. I remember when Uranus transited my 7th, I knew it was coming, and I've been married a long time, and I kept telling my husband, look, I've Venus conjunct the 7th house. So it was a Venus, Uranus was hitting Venus and the 7th house. And I kept telling my husband, look, I've got this transit. We really need to shake things up. I said, I don't know what that looks like. Let's go out on some dates and let's pretend we don't know each other and start from scratch. Maybe your favorite color has changed. Maybe your new, what kind of music you like has really changed. And we don't talk about those things anymore. So I was just looking for a way to stir things up. But I was married to a Taurus, and he just really didn't know what that meant. He didn't know why that seemed to be important. And so I remember having a dream about driving the bus and that I wasn't driving the bus anymore.
Oh.
And so it's really funny that you use the analogy of driving the bus. And I told him the dream. I said, "Look, the dream is that I was driving the bus and I got up and I told you you needed to drive the bus, but you refused, and the bus crashed."
Oh.
So it's uh, particularly when you're dealing with relationships, you can't do it for them. You've got somebody else involved in the process. But ultimately, I needed to change the way I was doing relationships. It
Mhm.
wasn't about changing the relationship, divorcing, though that came. It was really about the way I was doing relationships. And that was that I needed to break free from my enabling pattern. I was still trying to get him to come along, and I just needed to break free from the model and see where the relationship went, which is what I did. I no
Mhm.
longer tried to make it work for him as well. I just got more clear about who I was, and I wasn't going to enable him anymore. And eventually the relationship came apart because I didn't play the old role. And that's what I'm talking about. Instead of breaking free from the relationship as a reaction, thinking that the relationship was the problem, it was really about changing the dynamics of how I was showing up in the relationship. And either the other person was going to come along and participate in a new way, or they weren't. And he didn't. And that's the way that went.
Yeah, because any transit to your descendant will impact your ascendant. So it sounds
Yeah.
like it was you also having to integrate that Uranian energy in how you were showing up,
Well,
probably in
yeah,
all
but
relationships.
remember everything in your chart is you, even the seventh house. It's the projected you. And so it
Mm.
also tells us, the seventh house, about the qualities we attract in other people and the dynamics around the qualities we want in a relationship. And so the roles and patterns and all of that were there embedded in Aquarius on the seventh and Venus in Aquarius. And so that really had to change. I had to break out of my own role that I was playing. And so that changed the dynamics of the relationship because he married me and stayed in a relationship because I maintained a certain identity in a certain way. Right. And
Mhm.
as soon as I shifted that to become more authentic in my being, it created a counter sort of dissonance in the relationship. And he either had to shift himself to connect with me or the relationship was going to break apart, which is what it did. So, same thing with wherever Uranus transits. If you think it's the external manifestation of it, like the career in the 10th house, or friends in the 11th house, or relationships in the 7th house, or your family in the 4th house, or whatever it might be, pick a house. And if you think it's the external manifestations of that, then you're missing the point. What has to be liberated from is the dynamics that hold that reality in place so that when you shift that, we energetically issue invitations to the people around us to come with us in the new way. And if they don't, then we certainly run the risk of that. If it's a relation built on a relationship model, people in our lives, we run the risk of losing people. And that scares a lot of people. So that's one of the reasons people stay in similar dynamics with others or in our lives because it just feels easier, it feels comfortable.
Well, speaking of easy and comfortable in Uranus, what do you make of what Uranus in Taurus might want from us? And we know a lot of people with Taurus signatures, that Taurus can want stability to the point of being stuck. And stuckness is okay. Stuckness is pretty great for Taurus, but
Well, it's
Uranus is
comfortable,
not.
right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Comfortable. Well, what does Uranus want? So think about it. Let me just say this, all the outer planets want change in some way. They're signaling a change, but only for those things that no longer work in our lives. They're not asking us to change just for change's sake. It's not signaling change for things that actually do work in our lives. It's signaling us to evolve and change the things that no longer serve our soul's growth or the growth of our consciousness. And so Uranus is calling collectively. So when a planet, the outer planets are in the signs they are, Saturn's in Capricorn, Uranus is in Taurus, Neptune's in Pisces, and Pluto's in Capricorn. So these planets are in these signs and they represent and signal collective energy for all of us, right? Because it's there for all of us. And we're talking outside of our natal chart. But collectively, Uranus and Taurus is about breaking free of how we define our personal worth and value. For a long time, probably for the last 40 years or so, maybe more, maybe always, that the concept of monetary worth has outstripped anything else in terms of what we measure our value by.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be that how you participate in maybe your community, corporations and companies participated more strongly and had a sense of value towards their employees, and that has shifted and changed over time. And so that money became a driving force and a rationale for seeing people, community, and things as disposable in the name of profit.
I've heard from traditional astrologers that traditionally Venus, who rules Taurus, doesn't have anything to do with money. It's actually, that which we love and brings us pleasure. And traditionally, it's not associated with money. But in modern times, yes, it is very much associated with money. And it's kind of sad that some people love money. And that, and like you said, we place so much value on it.
Right.
So
right.
maybe the Uranus might help us to sort of just at least awaken to that. Like, how far have we gone in that direction?
Well, I hope. I certainly, and I know hope is not a plan, but I have, I create space for that in my world, that people will wake up and see that money isn't everything. And I think as Venus, I really see Venus more in terms of value and what we do love and what we attract. And the second house is more of the financial world that we have. So it's survival, value, self-worth, and monetary, the creation of monetary resources that buy the things that we have in our lives. So when Uranus is transiting the second, or Taurus, it's still about being more authentic in terms of our values, instead of just going along with what the culture determines of worth and value. For us all to wake up and say, what's really important to me? What's really of value in my life? Is family more important than money? Is put something up against resources and money, and ask yourself, what's more important? And then if you're not living a life that is directed towards what you think is of most value in your world, then you're either, your values are not true, what you're telling yourself is not true, and it needs some rework. So one way or the other, those values need to be examined. They're either true or they're not true. That's my point. So it does essentially come down to what we value in terms of Uranus and Taurus, and being more authentic. And authentic is really, to me, is just choosing it. There's nothing wrong with money. There's nothing wrong with having the things that you want. The question is, to what extent will you go to get it? And what will you give up to get it? And what will you sacrifice to get it? Mm-hmm. And is that truly authentic to who you are?
Yeah, exactly. And I think people don't realize that a lot of times we're not living our values. And when we're not living our values, that's where a lot of dissatisfaction comes from. A lot of psychic crisis and consciousness kind of thing. And it all comes down to, we haven't been clear on our values, and we're not spending our time and money focused just on those.
Right. And that creates energetically a cognitive dissonance, which is very much a Uranian concept. And so this dissonance is almost energetically, I think something's out of balance until it vibrates and shatters. It's shattering the form. So it's ultimately, all of it's all good. And you can either get on board with the energy as it's moving, or you can stand in resistance to it, but you won't win.
Yeah.
Evolution occurs, and we will grow in one way or another.
What is it? Change is inevitable, but growth is optional. I don't know who said that. It's like,
Exactly.
And I just love that you gave me this image of Laura Nalbandian running to catch a train that is already going, and I know you'll catch that train.
That's right, baby. I'm going to catch that train. Before we go, can I promote?
Yes, I wanted to ask you all. Well, I'm dying to hear all about, well, of course, Norwalk and this Soul Wise Astrology course that you've got coming up, and whatever else you want to share too. But definitely.
Sure. So let's start with Norwalk. Norwalk is sold out. Those of you who might be listening, you can get on a waiting list. I do have some cancellations happening. I had another cancellation today. So if you have a mind to, if this gets posted soon and you're hearing this, you can always reach me at lauranalbandian@gmail.com. You can go to norwalk.net and find my email there and contact me to get on the waiting list. The full conference, if it comes up for you and I call your name and email you, the full conference rate is $295 without meals. And so,
and that's what is that Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or when?
Well, it goes Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you can add Thursday workshop with Mark Jones. That's nearly sold out. That only has like 7 tickets left. And then there are Friday morning workshops. Lynn Bell, Georgia Stathis, and Rick Levine doing their workshops. And then the main body of the conference starts at 1 o'clock. So your $295 starts you at 1 o'clock and takes you all the way to Sunday at 9 o'clock at night. So everything between the opening ceremony and the closing ceremony is covered by your $295, except for the meals. And then there are post-conference workshops on Monday. Chris Brennan, Frank Clifford, and Kelly Surtees are doing workshops on Monday the 27th.
Oh, wow.
And then
okay, so it starts Friday the 24th is what we're looking
at. Right, Friday the 24th.
Okay,
yeah, and this fall, Patricia Walsh, Rose Marcus, and I, who have all been trained directly by Jeffrey Green, are starting our evolutionary school of astrology called Soulwise. Soulwise School of Evolutionary Astrology. We will have the website up and operational by Norwalk. When it goes live, it will be soulwiseastrologyschool.com. Soulwiseastrologyschool.com. You can also go to my website, lauranalbandian.com. Go to the bottom of the homepage, and there is a link to add your name to our mailing list for Soulwise. Not my personal mailing list, but the Soulwise mailing list. So if you want to receive information. And we are geared, we are set, and we'll be ready to go in the fall. I think our first class will be starting September 3rd. So we'll be opening up registration for the class, for the school, right here at Norwalk.
And so it is, I thought I read somewhere, is it like a 2-year program? How long?
You can start with, if you have some astrology background, studied in some way, then you can start with, we're going to actually start with the advanced stuff. We're going to start with the Pluto method first. And next year, we'll start a second track for people who know nothing about astrology and want to start evolutionary astrology from the ground up archetypally. They want to start with beginning astrology, the archetypes, learning how to blend archetypes and do delineation. The track that's starting this September, we'll be doing the archetypes, doing a review of the archetypes, and then jumping right into Pluto methodology. We'll be doing nodes and aspects and phases, which is all evolutionary astrology material. And then there'll be some elective classes that will be add-ons that can be done, like relationship astrology from an evolutionary point of view. More deep dive into transits and progressions from an evolutionary point of view. The lunar nodes, a more deep dive into that. So we'll have some add-ons, and then we will have, as part of the course, is if you choose to be certified by us as an evolutionary astrologer, then there's a certification process that you can add. If you just want to learn it and be done with it, and that's fine, good, then you can do that. But if you want to actually be certified by the 3 of us, then there is a process by which to do that.
Okay, so there's an additional process on top of the. Yeah. So is it mostly online, or how's
it'll be Zoom. It'll be Zoom classes, and we will have labs and discussion all on in the Zoom classroom.
And when does it start? I don't know if you said the date.
Early September. It'll be September 3rd is our target date.
Oh my gosh.
I know, it's right around the corner.
So that's you, Patricia Walsh, and you said Rose Marcus.
Rose Marcus.
Wow. That is a dream team of of women, evolutionary astrologers. That sounds amazing. And yeah, it's about time too. It's about time you all got
the women need to step up, man. So we're doing it.
It was funny. I was talking to Patricia Walsh, and she said you were going to do like the crone, or no, what was it? Like, you know how there's maiden, mother, and crone, like the three goddesses. But she said, but nobody wanted maiden. Like whoever drew the short straw would be maiden, because you're all proud to be mature.
Yeah, I'm proud to be I don't know. I guess being a grandmother. I guess I'm crone, huh?
There's a stage, apparently lately there, the past, I don't know, 20 years, they said they inserted a stage between mother and crone. It's the queen.
There needs to be, because but though I am a grandmother, and I'm the only one out of the three that's a grandmother, but I think I'm age-wise in the middle. I know Patricia is younger than me.
You are in the queen phase for sure. Yeah, I thought like it was kind of a huge leap between the mother and crone,
right?
Yeah. There needs to be turn in sort of, something in there. So yeah, there's actually a lot of writings and books and stuff on the queen phase. It's very interesting. I think you'd find that fascinating.
I like that. I will take that as my stage right now.
Well, you got a train to catch, so I'll let you go.
I do, man. I do.
You do. Thank you so much. This is a huge honor to have you on the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Christina.
I'd love to have you back
anytime.
And I'm dying to hear how Norwalk goes. I'm sure Norwalk is going to be even more amazing this year.
You're not going to be there?
I can't come this year, no. But next year, 2020.
So next year, folks, Memorial Day weekend 2020 is Norwalk. Same location here and near Seattle.
The same location? You're not going to rent out the big old, what is it, like some kind of amphitheater? You might.
No. We like to keep Norwalk cozy. I mean, we got 500 people over 3 days. But
I'm sure you probably have a bunch of gate crashers too, hanging out at the bar. You never know.
Well, they can come down. They just can't go to the classes, but there's going to be a lot of people there, and we'll either make it. We'll see how we handle it. If we need to make it smaller next year, we will. And I'm not adverse to that. So we'll see how it goes. I just don't want it any bigger than it is.
Yeah.
Big enough.
Well, because it's great that it's intimate. You can hobnob with like all the major astrologers and meet people at all levels. I mean, it's so much fun.
Exactly. That's what Norwalk is.
All right, Laura, thank you so much, and I look forward to next time.
Okay.
Bye.
All right. Take care.
Bye.